Hello, this is Cotton Stoops, and welcome back to another Lumion Legacy HTUC video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Nymesis, otherwise known as Namare's Dark-type counterpart. And in comparison to Namare, there's going to be a lot of similarities, but also a lot of differences between the two that affect Nymesis' viability. So today's video, we're going to be talking about Nymesis, the counters and checks in teammates in order to know how to use Nymesis in your battles, as well as knowing the roles and sets that Nymesis can play. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to use and counter Nymesis. So in terms of what to make of Nymesis, we must talk about its base stats. Its base stats for the most part is pretty one-to-one to Namare. It has a pretty good Eder stat of 115, a pretty good range attack stat of 119, and a good speed tier of 100. This speed tier of 100 lets it outspeed Shachi, Ikazune, Wintrix, and Vesperatu all naturally, and some Lumions below it. This makes Nymesis a pretty good Lumion at outspeeding stuff naturally, and if you want to outspeed something in the 90s to 80s ranges of speed, you won't need to invest a lot of speed into that, so that makes Nymesis already a pretty good Lumion to outspeed stuff. However, its energy stat and its range attack stat really does breathe some life into this Lumion, because its energy stat of 115 allows it to throw out many moves, and its range attack of 119 allows it to hit decently hard, and it can take advantage of the new items such as the specialty gloves and boots, which it will help it in the damage department if you choose to do so. However, other items that I'll be talking about in the set section are arguably much more fitting for this Lumion. However, it does have some other attributes, more specifically bad ones, where its bulk levels in its HP and its melee defense aren't the best. Because these are in the 70 ranges, Nymesis doesn't ever really want to take hits from melee attackers like Tatab and the stuff of that. Same thing as Namare, however, it does do a little bit better against those melee attackers, and I'll explain why in the later, but its defensive typing does slightly help it better against those stuff. And its range defense stat of 112, saving its bulk, and while its HP is still a pretty mid HP stat, its range defense at least helps it to make it a little bit better against some range attackers in the game. Now onto its abilities, which is pretty much where the unique distinction comes in other than the move pool and the typing. Now, Nymesis' normal ability Impose will transfer your status ailment to the next party member that swaps in. However, thinking positively, you can carry something like a Volcanic Ash or some other future move that sets yourself as a status, and then you can swap into a Vigorous user, which can take advantage of that. I will be talking about this later in the teammate section, but stuff like Vigorous, Colossotrops, or Buzzolin would make use of this normal ability pretty well. In its secret ability, Pitch Black. Pitch Black allows Nymesis to have a 50% damage increase for dark type moves, which helps Nymesis put it in its higher echelon of damage tiers in this game, because it does have 50% damage to go along with its high base power dark type moves with its 119 range attack. As for its defensive typing, obviously resistance wise, it's mainly going to be benefiting from the Dark Mind and Brawler resistances. In my opinion, this helps out its melee defense stat a little bit better because dark types like Vesperatu and Mind or Brawler types like Mutagon or Wrestlin, it does have the potential to swap in on them, and of course either hit them back super effectively or hard neutrally. While Nymesis still doesn't have the stats to back up its matchups against those Lumions, it can come in down to a clutch situation and stuff like that. And as for its weaknesses, Fire and Electric are pretty common because Pyrolin, Seer Knight, Billowforge for the Fire side, Electric, the Phage Knot and Eliphages and Zulongs. And of course, Ice types always going to be an issue because of Icicle Traps, and then Light types, mainly from Flash and Flea users. Luminami, you always have to make sure you're hitting it with a Dark type move on a swap, because you never know if it has a Shade Pearl or something like that. So, overall, Nymesis looks to be a pretty good offensive Lumion that has a pretty low bulk stat in melee defense. Like all offensive Lumions, one of their bulks have to be their weak spot, and that has to be Nemesis for its melee defense, which means that it cannot swap in on a lot of melee attackers, although its defensive typing does help it a little bit better because meta melee attackers like Vesperatu and Mutagun, it can swap in on if it needs to, and this also leads for limited setup chances against melee attackers. The best way you're able to set up really is mainly going to be your range attackers. It is a pretty good versatile Lumion because when I get to the set section, you're going to learn that it has a lot of utility moves, which is pretty good, a lot of setup, and of course it does have Impose to help certain niche abilities out for Colostrops and Buzzolin. So now that we're out of that way, let's get on to the sets section. So unfortunately, onto Nemesis set, it doesn't really have a good melee or range defensive sets that I'd really recommend. This is mainly because melee defense-wise, Dragonin just outclasses it because of its stats and its move pool with its coverage and utility. And as for its range defensive sets, while yes, there are some potential in that, unfortunately, there aren't really enough Lumions that Nemesis can wall, at least in the OU metagame, that I'd rather warrant running that range defensive set. And of course, we are in a new meta, things can change, but I don't think Nemesis will be running a defensive set anytime soon. Other than that, its ability of choice, you should run the Pitch Black if you have the chance, but of course, not running it is fine. Impose is perfectly fine, and you can do some funky stuff with vigorous users. Other than this, you can use the personality Nimble. Nimble is pretty universally liked, and it does help you outspeed Nimble Wintrix's, Shachi's, Ikazune's that are not running boots, Nimble Vesperatus. It's just really good to run this, and the damage difference on Smart is arguably noticeable. However, Smart you won't really need it because of Pitch Black. It does enough damage for you, and the new items that you can run. As for your moveset, Shadow Pulse and Jetstream, they are your two stabs, so why not and run it. Peace of Mind is going to be your best setup and only setup, and then the last option can be Provoke, Perch, or Barter. Barter, of course, you can remove your Volcanic Ash if you want to, and of course Provoke is to stop walls from healing on you or setting up, so you can potentially break them eventually with hazards and all of that chip. And then Perch is if you'd rather find yourself wanting to play more of a defensive role and play more consistency with HP. Although it is not needed, it also can turn the tide of the battle. Item of choice. So choice of essence is what I'd probably go. However, it does have the energy to use power cuffs. And other than the volcanic ash, which I've mentioned many times in this video, you can use specialty boots or gloves. This is mainly because Nemesis does have the damage potential to take advantage of gloves, it has the speed tier to take advantage of specialty boots, and it has barter to potentially ruin the offensive or defensive movement that you're going to barter with these specialty items. It does sound found in concept, however, there hasn't been too many Lumions that has the ability to take advantage of this specialty boots bartering other than something like Tatab, and I'm not sure if Nemesis can be that Lumion, but you never know. Someone might make it work, I'm just listing it as a good option. Other than that, as for its TPs, this is all pretty standard, so I won't waste time on this. 12 energy to get up to 290, I'd rather just have this be an even energy stat. And then for the rest, 160 speed will allow you to outspeed Nimble 200 Wintrixes, and then the rest will go to HP, which will be 128. However, if you want to run 200 speed, which is perfectly fine, you can run 200 speed, 80 HP, so you can run an HP stat that is high as possible while not being an even one, so you get 5 hit KO'd by icicle traps. And then range defense, which it will be 8 because you gotta put that extra ATP somewhere. Now, not to harp on this section too much because in my opinion it is pretty self-explanatory, we'll be going over the counters and checks and teammates for Nemesis. Obviously, the bench killers, they're going to be your best options because they can hit Nemesis super effectively or very hard. And obviously Nemesis can either do no damage back or it just gets to it KO'd, which is not good for it. Defensive answers. Stuff like Pyroland with Fanning Flame, defensive Eclipses, Elophages, Icicles, and Morates, they all do very well against Nemesis because they either resist its coverage or they just plain out hit it super effectively and have the bulk to take it out. So, what are ways to stop these Lumions? Now, the best ways or the most niche ways are impose abusers. This is mainly Lumions like Colossotrops or Buzzlin that would normally force to be running Volcanic Ash, but now doesn't even have to because they can just get swapped in and get the burn chance, and then they can use their specialty gloves in this case to do massive amounts of damage. I'm pretty sure Volcanic Ash is like a 50% boost on top of that +1 boost from specialty gloves. These guys, and when set up correctly, is going to be doing so much damage. Won't be able to say, okay, you get it. These guys will be doing so much damage. Not to mention these guys already break in everything that Nemesis gets countered by. Other than that, you can go pretty classic with a Nimtooth. Obviously, it's inspired by the Mare, but Joltooth here can pretty much break every single answer that Nemesis is worried about. And as for Joltooth, Nemesis on the double can threaten stuff like Tundulin, and that's good for Joltooth. Other than that, you can also use something like Dakuda, because if you do take note of what Dakuda gets countered by, which is going to be your snacks unless the Dakuda is a Soul Burst one. Other than your snack, you can consider something like Dokomori, which in that case, Nemesis can take care of both pretty well. Other than that, Dakuda is a pretty solid double to the likes of Icicle, Pyroland, while not Elephage, depending on the Elophage's speed tier. You can swap in on other stuff as well. And of course, Dakuda, with the new buff that it gained, it now actually has the damage power to really threaten teams with Icicle Chap based teams with Power Gloves or the specialty goggles. It really depends on what Dakuda you really want to, but this synergy already does seem to be pretty strong. So Nemesis looks to be a pretty mid Lumion to come out of this event. Obviously, I chose the most easiest Lumion to analyze because, oh my goodness, the next Lumions that I will be talking about later are arguably going to be probably make or breaking this metagame. More leading to break, but speaking more on Nemesis, Nemesis seems to be like a fun option for vigorous users. That's pretty much the best niche I can really think of. Other than that, we don't really have a lot of ranged dark type representation. Obviously, the meta is plenty prepared enough for it, but if you look at the range of walls right now, or the stuff that would be walling ranged attackers, they're not really going to be able to resist dark. I don't think there's anything in the current metagame that does do that, so Nemesis for the most part will be hitting walls neutrally. However, because of the new specialty gloves and the specialty goggles, I don't know if Nemesis can keep up both as a damage dealer or as a bulky Lumion to set up and deal massive amounts of damage. I'm not sure if Nemesis will be able to do well in this meta, but who knows. I'm just returning from the game, and Nemesis looks to be a pretty decent Lumion already. Let me know what you think of Nemesis down below, and of course, like and subscribe, join the Discord. This is Constoops signing off to remind you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.